There are car companies that struggle, car companies that fade, and then there is Saab, a brand whose downfall reads less like a business failure and more like a slow-motion disaster built from brilliance, stubbornness, and a single idea that changed everything. Born from aviation and driven by engineers who believed rules were optional, Saab created machines that felt smarter, safer, and stranger than anything else on the road. But behind the curved windshields and turbochargers was a story no brochure ever hinted at. A story of internal fights, corporate pressure, catastrophic miscalculations, and a dream that grew bigger than the company holding it together. This is not a tale of nostalgia. This is how a genius brand unraveled, piece by piece, long before anyone dared admit it. The illusion of genius, how Saab's different is better philosophy hit its first fatal flaws. Saab entered the automotive industry with an identity so distinctive, so proudly unconventional, and so deeply rooted in its aviation heritage that many observers assumed those differences were inherently strengths. Yet from the beginning, this philosophy created an illusion of genius that concealed structural vulnerabilities no one inside the company wanted to confront. Saab's early engineers believed their aircraft background granted them superior insight into aerodynamics, safety, and mechanical logic, and this conviction shaped every major decision the company made. Decisions guided less by market realities and more by the belief that the automotive world simply lacked imagination. The result was a series of vehicles that were brilliant, original, and technically fascinating, but also burdened with foundational flaws that became increasingly difficult to ignore as the industry evolved around them. From the outset, Saab rejected conventional wisdom. Instead of adopting proven industry-standard platforms, the company built cars around aviation-inspired methods that required unusual layouts, complex mechanical solutions, and manufacturing processes significantly more expensive than those of its competitors. Saab's internal mantra was simple: if the industry zigged, it would zag, and this contrarian mindset became a defining principle, celebrated inside the company as proof of intellectual superiority. But over time, this insistence on being different hardened into dogma. Engineers who proposed mainstream solutions were dismissed as unimaginative, and managers who questioned cost escalation were accused of failing to appreciate Saab's identity. Within this culture, difference was equated with brilliance, and brilliance was assumed to guarantee success, even as early warning signs began to emerge. The problem surfaced quietly. Saab's commitment to unconventional engineering dramatically increased production costs, yet leadership convinced itself that customers would eventually recognize the inherent value of such uniqueness. Early models depended on bespoke components, hand-adjusted assemblies, and intricate systems that required significant time and specialized labor to produce. Engineers viewed the complexity as proof of their ingenuity, but manufacturing teams struggled to keep production efficient, and financial divisions warned repeatedly that the business model was unsustainable. Instead of addressing these concerns, Saab doubled down on its philosophy, insisting that efficiency was for ordinary car makers and that Saab's mission was to build extraordinary vehicles. This refusal to acknowledge economic reality widened the gap between engineering ambition and commercial viability. As Saab's reputation grew among enthusiasts who appreciated its eccentricity, the company misinterpreted this niche admiration as broad market validation. Internally, the narrative became self-reinforcing. Saab was the brilliant outsider, the engineer's car, the intellectual choice in a world of predictable manufacturers. Yet, what went largely ignored was that while Saab's innovations, turbocharging, advanced safety structures, aerodynamic philosophies, were genuinely ahead of their time, they existed atop financial structures already straining under escalating complexity. Production volumes lagged, profit margins thinned, and management continued to believe that superior ideas would eventually overcome inferior economics, a belief reinforced only temporarily by isolated successes. Beneath the surface was a tension that grew increasingly destructive. Saab designed cars as though engineering purity were the only goal that mattered, while the broader industry was shifting toward scale, modularity, and cost efficiency. Saab refused to compromise its identity, but that identity required resources it did not have. Each new model demanded unique tooling, custom manufacturing processes, specialized training, and components that could not be shared across platforms. Customers enjoyed the quirks, but quirky cars required expensive maintenance, and dealerships struggled to support the brand's intricate systems. Instead of viewing these challenges as symptoms of deeper structural flaws, Saab treated them as signs that the world simply failed to appreciate superior design. Internally, optimism masked the severity of the situation. Engineers believed they were pushing boundaries. Managers believed they were preserving a cultural legacy. Marketers believed they were cultivating a loyal, discerning audience. But none of these beliefs addressed the core issue: Saab's refusal to align engineering ambition with economic sustainability. Competitors standardized platforms, streamlined costs, and increased production efficiency, while Saab continued building cars that demanded more money, more time, and more complexity than the market could support. Leadership praised innovation while quietly ignoring mounting evidence that the business model was drifting toward instability. By the time the industry accelerated toward globalization and platform consolidation, Saab was already locked into a philosophy that made adaptation nearly impossible. The illusion of genius, the belief that being different was always better, had become a structural weakness that affected every decision the company made. Saab's early brilliance, celebrated and romanticized, came at a cost the company never reconciled, ensuring that the flaws hidden beneath its originality would eventually grow into the forces that pushed it toward collapse. The cost of brilliance: why Saab's revolutionary cars were financial catastrophes in slow motion. Saab's reputation for technical brilliance grew rapidly, fueled by innovations that genuinely reshaped automotive engineering. Yet, every breakthrough the company celebrated carried hidden financial consequences that accumulated quietly and steadily, turning what looked like a legacy of ingenuity into a slow economic collapse that few inside the organization had the courage to confront. Saab's engineers believed that revolutionary ideas justified extraordinary costs, and leadership embraced this belief so completely that financial sustainability became secondary to the pursuit of clever solutions, creating a culture where technical achievement was rewarded even when it undermined the company's ability to survive. From the earliest models, Saab embedded its vehicles with engineering philosophies derived from aviation, prioritizing safety, performance, and aerodynamic purity. But these choices demanded specialized components, unique tooling, and intricately assembled structures that bore little resemblance to the cost-efficient, scalable designs used by mainstream manufacturers. Each part Saab designed was treated as an opportunity to showcase intelligence rather than practicality, and instead of simplifying production, the company increased complexity in pursuit of marginal gains. As a result, Saab's cars became marvels of clever design, but their production costs exceeded what the market would tolerate for a brand lacking the prestige or pricing power of established luxury competitors. Turbocharging, long celebrated as Saab's defining innovation, illustrates this imbalance. Saab pioneered the transformation of turbos from fragile performance accessories into everyday tools that improved efficiency and power. Yet, the systems required for such refinement, sophisticated boost controls, heat management architecture, reinforced internal components, and carefully tuned electronics, added layers of expense the company's limited production volume could not absorb. Larger manufacturers could offset these costs across millions of units. Saab could not, and every innovation increased per-unit expenses in ways that compounded over time. Internally, the contradiction between engineering ambition and economic reality generated escalating tension. Saab's engineers valued experimentation and refinement, often pushing projects through multiple redesign cycles in pursuit of perfection. And while this produced vehicles with undeniable charm and character, it also created timelines and budgets that expanded far beyond initial projections. Financial departments warned repeatedly that development expenses were rising faster than revenue, yet management treated such warnings as the unavoidable price of greatness rather than indicators of impending instability. In this climate, cost overruns became routine, and the idea of a simplified, economically viable solution was dismissed as a betrayal of Saab's identity. The manufacturing side suffered even more severely. Saab operated on a scale too small to benefit from modern efficiencies, yet its production lines were structured as though the company were a boutique engineering workshop rather than an automaker competing in a globalized industry. Assembly lines required highly trained workers to execute intricate procedures. Suppliers were asked to create specialized components in low volumes, and quality control demanded a level of precision that consumed time and money Saab could not spare. Every deviation from industry standard practice raised costs, but instead of adapting, Saab convinced itself that its uniqueness justified the inefficiency. Dealers and service centers faced the consequences as well. Saab's intricate designs required unique diagnostic equipment, specialized training, and an inventory of uncommon parts, all of which raised operating costs and frustrated customers who encountered long repair delays and higher-than-average bills. Enthusiasts tolerated these burdens, but mainstream buyers did not, and Saab struggled to expand beyond a loyal niche. This created a paradox. Saab needed larger sales volumes to offset its rising expenses, yet the characteristics that defined its identity limited its broader appeal. As the automotive world shifted toward platform sharing and global integration, Saab's vulnerabilities became even more pronounced. Competitors spread engineering costs across multiple brands and millions of units, while Saab continued investing heavily in unique architectures that served only a small audience. The financial gap widened each year, yet leadership clung to the belief that technical innovation would eventually secure market dominance, ignoring the increasingly obvious reality that brilliance alone could not compensate for financial imbalance. By the time Saab recognized the need for structural reform, it had already locked itself into a cost framework that undermined every attempt at recovery. The company's innovations, however impressive, were built atop fragile finances, and the belief that engineering excellence would eventually justify mounting expenses proved disastrously misguided. Saab's brilliance was never the problem. Its refusal to balance genius with economic practicality was, and this imbalance would soon collide with the pressures of corporate acquisition, accelerating the slow-motion financial catastrophe unfolding beneath the surface. Cracks behind the cockpit glass, internal disputes, mismanagement, and the culture that refused to change. The first internal fractures at Saab emerged not through dramatic clashes, but through a slow accumulation of disagreements, misaligned priorities, and simmering resentments that spread quietly across the organization, creating an atmosphere where unresolved tensions became as familiar as the aircraft-inspired dashboards the company proudly installed in every car. Saab had long celebrated its unique culture, shaped by engineers who believed they were building machines that embodied intelligence and integrity. Yet this same culture gradually hardened into a rigid mindset that resisted modernization, discouraged dissent, and treated any proposed deviation from tradition as an attack on the company's identity. What had once defined Saab's strength, its stubborn commitment to doing things its own way, slowly transformed into a structural weakness that leadership refused to confront. Inside engineering, disputes intensified as younger designers pushed for contemporary solutions, while veteran engineers insisted that Saab's traditional methods were inseparable from its heritage. When newcomers proposed modular architectures or streamlined manufacturing approaches, they were met with skepticism from senior staff who believed such changes would dilute the company's essence. This generational divide widened as the rest of the automotive industry embraced global standardization. While competitors refined their processes, Saab clung to old habits, convinced that its uniqueness justified inefficiency. Meetings meant to inspire innovation often devolved into circular arguments, with one side advocating evolution and the other defending traditions that no longer aligned with market realities. The management structure compounded these tensions. Saab's leadership maintained an idealized view of the company's identity, romanticizing its engineering-first ethos while ignoring the financial and operational consequences of that philosophy. Managers who attempted to introduce cost controls or impose disciplined development practices found themselves sidelined, criticized for threatening the spirit that made Saab distinct. As a result, departments became increasingly defensive. each protecting its own priorities while losing sight of the broader challenges. Engineering blamed management for failing to appreciate technical realities. Management blamed engineering for resisting oversight, and manufacturing teams were trapped between the contradictory expectations of building brilliance and maintaining feasibility. This cultural rigidity created an environment where minor problems quickly escalated into systemic obstacles. Engineers continued refining features that added complexity without meaningful benefit, while managers approved these projects out of fear of appearing obstructive. Production teams struggled with designs that demanded precision beyond what the factory infrastructure could support, leading to inefficiencies dismissed as temporary, rather than indicative of deeper structural flaws. Instead of confronting these patterns, leadership encouraged employees to preserve the Saab way, framing caution as disloyalty and rewarding those who upheld tradition, even when tradition hindered progress. Financial pressures exposed the fragility of this internal culture. Limited budgets triggered conflicts as departments competed for scarce resources. Engineering demanded continued investment in innovation. Manufacturing requested funds to modernize aging facilities, and marketing insisted that stronger branding was essential for survival. Instead of establishing a coherent strategy, leadership attempted to appease every group, spreading resources too thin and ensuring that no department received the support needed to function effectively. This imbalance created a cycle of underperformance, frustration, and blame shifting that deepened internal divisions. Morale deteriorated as employees began to recognize that the culture they once celebrated had become the organization's greatest obstacle. Workers complained that decisions were driven by sentiment rather than strategy, and those advocating for modernization often found themselves isolated. Several promising engineers left for competitors who offered clearer direction and more structured environments, while those who stayed felt torn between pride in Saab's uniqueness and frustration at its refusal to evolve. Their loyalty kept them committed, but each failed initiative and each dismissed proposal chipped away at their optimism. As these cracks widened, communication across departments became increasingly strained. Reports were softened to avoid provoking conflict, warnings were delayed to prevent confrontation, and information that should have guided critical decisions became lost in layers of internal politics. Leadership continued to project confidence publicly, but employees knew that Saab's culture, once celebrated as a symbol of creative purity, was now preventing the organization from adapting to a rapidly changing industry. The cockpit-style dashboards and quirky engineering decisions that once represented Saab's charm now symbolized the stubbornness that was weakening its foundations. By the time Saab finally acknowledged the need for cultural reform, the mindset that had shaped the company for decades was already deeply entrenched, creating an internal landscape defined by disputes, mismanagement, and an unwavering refusal to change. These cracks, though largely invisible from the outside, would soon collide with external pressures, revealing just how vulnerable Saab had become beneath its proud veneer of ingenuity. The big acquisition: how GM's rescue became the most damaging partnership in Saab's history. When General Motors stepped in to acquire Saab, the deal was publicly framed as a stabilizing lifeline for a company known for its engineering brilliance but crippled by financial fragility. Yet, from the moment the agreement was sealed, it became clear that the two organizations were guided by philosophies so fundamentally incompatible that the partnership would produce not synergy or renewal but mistrust, miscommunication, and the gradual dismantling of everything that had once defined Saab's identity. Saab believed it was gaining the resources and scale needed to modernize. GM believed it was acquiring a quirky European brand that could be streamlined, standardized, and neatly integrated into its global blueprint. Both assumptions were disastrously misguided. Initial optimism within Saab evaporated quickly as engineers realized GM had little interest in preserving the company's unique engineering approach. GM executives viewed Saab's methods as inefficient, overly expensive, and misaligned with the industry's shift toward globally shared platforms. To GM, Saab's habit of designing components from scratch was financially irrational. To Saab's engineers, GM's cost-cutting demands represented an attack on the company's identity. What GM interpreted as necessary discipline, Saab interpreted as destructive dilution, and what Saab defended as essential, GM dismissed as unnecessary indulgence. This cultural collision created an environment where neither side trusted the other's motivations. GM pushed aggressively to integrate Saab into its global platform strategy, insisting that the Swedish engineers adopt shared components and architectures to reduce development costs. But Saab resisted, arguing that its identity depended on engineering principles incompatible with GM's mass-market templates. Saab wanted to preserve its aircraft-inspired ergonomics, turbocharging practices, and safety-focused structures. GM wanted to reduce complexity by forcing Saab into architectures never intended to support its unconventional designs. The result was a series of compromised vehicles that satisfied neither side, too generic for Saab loyalists and too expensive for GM's financial expectations. Tensions deepened as GM grew frustrated with Saab's reluctance to comply. GM executives believed Saab was clinging to outdated traditions. Saab believed GM was imposing systems that ignored decades of specialized experience. Meetings became notorious for unresolved disputes, and decisions were often made through political pressure rather than technical or financial logic. Engineers who had once thrived in Saab's collaborative environment suddenly found themselves navigating layers of bureaucracy that stifled experimentation and rewarded conformity. These tensions materialized in the vehicles produced during the partnership. Saab was required to build models on GM platforms unsuited for its engineering philosophies, forcing compromises that produced electrical inconsistencies, mechanical mismatches, and structural issues Saab had never faced before. Engineers complained that they were being asked to graft Saab's identity onto foundations that fundamentally rejected it, and frustration grew as reliability problems emerged in cars carrying Saab's badge. GM blamed Saab for refusing to modernize. Saab blamed GM's platforms for causing problems impossible to solve within imposed constraints. Distrust expanded beyond engineering. GM's oversight clashed with Saab's development cycles, which traditionally relied on lengthy periods of refinement that GM interpreted as wasteful. GM demanded faster timelines and stricter budgets. Saab warned that such pressure would compromise quality. As deadlines tightened and budgets shrank, the quality of Saab's vehicles declined, and customers began noticing drops in durability, refinement, and authenticity. Saab's core identity, its thoughtful engineering and clever design, was being eroded piece by piece. Internally, morale deteriorated. Saab employees, who had once taken pride in their independence, felt constrained and undervalued, while GM managers grew frustrated with Saab's resistance to corporate integration. The two organizations functioned less like partners and more like adversaries forced into cooperation. Saab's headquarters saw GM as heavy-handed and dismissive. GM's leadership saw Saab as sentimental and inefficient. Each disagreement widened the divide, and each compromise produced vehicles that alienated Saab's supporters while disappointing GM's executives. The structural flaws of the partnership became undeniable when Saab's costs continued to rise despite GM's insistence on standardization. GM expected profitability after integration. Instead, the mismatched engineering created new technical issues that required expensive corrections. Saab's identity weakened, its reliability slipped, and its financial performance deteriorated. Yet, neither side could agree on a path forward. By the time GM realized Saab could not be simplified into a standard template, the partnership had already devolved into frustration and diminishing returns. What began as a rescue slowly transformed into a dismantling, as GM's attempts to modernize Saab only exposed incompatibilities neither company was equipped to resolve. The acquisition, intended to save Saab, accelerated its unraveling, proving far more damaging than the financial pressures it had been meant to solve. The one idea that killed everything, Saab's fatal bet on becoming a premium innovator without the infrastructure to sustain it. The most destructive decision in Saab's history did not emerge from impulse or corporate desperation. but from a polished, strategic vision that looked logical, ambitious, and perfectly aligned with the company's self-image, yet ultimately pushed Saab far beyond the limits of what its fragile structure could sustain. Saab convinced itself that its future depended on becoming a premium innovator, a boutique engineering powerhouse capable of competing not with mainstream automakers but with luxury brands, whose financial strength, production scale, and global infrastructures were vastly larger than anything Saab had ever possessed. What appeared to be a bold, forward-thinking strategy soon revealed itself as a fatal miscalculation that magnified existing flaws, exposed new vulnerabilities, and trapped the company in a pursuit of status it could never realistically maintain. The idea emerged during a moment when the automotive industry was transforming around advanced technologies, and Saab believed this shift played directly to its strengths. The company's engineering-first culture, its history of clever design, and its enthusiastic fan base created an illusion that Saab was already close to premium territory. Executives insisted that the brand did not need reinvention, only recognition, higher pricing, and a more aggressive innovation pipeline. But this logic ignored an uncomfortable truth. A premium identity requires far more than intelligent engineering. It demands financial stability, robust supply chains, high-precision manufacturing, and global marketing power. Elements Saab lacked in every measurable way. Inside the company, the premium mandate triggered projects that immediately overwhelmed its limited infrastructure. Teams were instructed to develop vehicles capable of competing with German luxury brands. Yet, they did not have the budgets, staffing, testing capacities, or platform flexibility required to operate at such a level. Engineers proposed sophisticated systems, intricate mechanical solutions, and high-spec materials intended to elevate Saab beyond its rivals. But every idea required development resources far beyond what Saab could realistically support. Instead of aligning ambitions with capacity, leadership encouraged even bolder experimentation, convinced that technological breakthroughs would justify the escalating costs. Manufacturing, already strained by the complexity of Saab's traditional designs, became the first department to feel the weight of the new strategy. The factories lacked equipment to produce luxury-grade components consistently. Suppliers could not deliver high-spec materials at the scale Saab demanded, and the quality control infrastructure was not designed for the tight tolerances required at the premium level. Defect rates increased, delays piled up, and rework costs soared. Leadership refused to acknowledge these as structural issues, dismissing them instead as temporary growing pains that would resolve themselves once Saab fully stepped into its new identity. Marketing widened the gap between ambition and reality. Saab began presenting itself as a refined, technologically superior luxury brand, producing campaigns that raised consumer expectations to heights the company had no capacity to meet. Customers seeking premium refinement encountered vehicles that were clever but uneven, innovative but not always polished, and priced far above what the market believed a small manufacturer could justify. Meanwhile, established luxury brands, armed with massive development budgets, continued advancing at a pace Saab could not match, leaving the company stranded between aspiration and feasibility. Internally, morale deteriorated as employees realized the company was pursuing an identity unsupported by its infrastructure. Engineers were frustrated by demands for features the company could not reliably deliver. Manufacturing teams struggled under production targets misaligned with factory capability. Financial departments warned that development budgets were expanding much faster than revenue. Leadership dismissed these concerns as negativity, framing skepticism as disloyalty rather than evidence. The divide widened between those devoted to the dream of Saab as a luxury innovator and those who understood that the brand was attempting to build a premium empire on the foundation of a niche manufacturer. This crisis was intensified by Saab's dependence on General Motors, whose own financial troubles made it unwilling to support Saab's premium ambitions with the required investment. GM approved select initiatives but restricted funding in ways that made true premium execution impossible, creating a paradox where Saab was expected to deliver luxury-level results using mid-market resources. The inevitable compromises produced vehicles that were neither fully premium nor cost-efficient, further damaging Saab's credibility and weakening its already fragile reputation. By the time Saab finally recognized that the premium strategy was unsustainable, it had already committed enormous resources to platforms, technologies, and development cycles that could not be reversed. The one idea, meant to save Saab, reinventing itself as a premium innovator, ended up amplifying every vulnerability, draining resources at accelerating speed, and pushing the company onto a trajectory from which recovery was no longer possible. What began as a bold vision became the defining misjudgment that sealed Saab's fate. The technical breakdown, failures, delays, defective platforms, and the cars that exposed Saab's collapse. The technical collapse of Saab did not begin with one catastrophic misstep, but through a slow, accumulating chain of engineering failures, platform mismatches, and development delays that eventually exposed how deeply the company's foundations were deteriorating. What had once been celebrated as a culture of aviation-inspired ingenuity devolved into an unstable mix of compromised designs, incompatible components, and rushed fixes driven not by engineering confidence but by financial pressure and corporate interference. Each new vehicle signaled fragmentation rather than progress, and every attempt to correct emerging issues only revealed deeper weaknesses that Saab no longer had the resources or structure to repair. The first visible cracks appeared when Saab was forced to abandon its traditional engineering philosophies and build cars on platforms never designed to support them. Corporate demands for cost reductions pushed Saab onto architectures intended for mass-market vehicles rather than the turbo-focused, safety-centric, unconventional systems that defined the brand's identity. Engineers warned repeatedly that retrofitting Saab's unique logic onto these foundations would produce instability, electrical inconsistencies, and structural compromises, yet leadership insisted adaptation was mandatory. The resulting vehicles felt unbalanced, unpredictable, and far removed from the precise engineering Saab had once embodied. These platform conflicts resulted in development delays that severely damaged Saab's reputation. Engineers were forced to rework and redesign components repeatedly to make them function on architectures that resisted their integration. Safety systems triggered false alerts, electronic control units misinterpreted sensor data, and powertrains behaved inconsistently under load. Instead of addressing the incompatibility directly, leadership demanded quick fixes that compounded complexity. By the time several models entered production, they carried flaws customers noticed immediately: erratic handling, reliability problems, and quality issues that contradicted the brand's history of thoughtful engineering. The 9.3 and 9.5, intended to represent Saab's modern revival, became the most troubling examples of the company's technical unraveling. Both were restricted by platform limitations that undermined suspension tuning, chassis rigidity, and electrical stability. Components sourced from corporate partners clashed with Saab's systems, generating software conflicts, sensor failures, and unpredictable drivability concerns. Technicians struggled to diagnose issues because they stemmed from architectural contradictions, not isolated component faults. Customers who expected classic Saab character instead encountered vehicles that felt like awkward hybrids, reinforcing the belief that Saab's identity had been compromised beyond recognition. Internal testing only confirmed how severe the problems had become. Engineers documented abnormal wear patterns, inconsistent turbo behavior, and electrical vulnerabilities that worsened under temperature extremes or prolonged use. These issues required redesigns Saab no longer had time or funds to perform. Budgets were cut mid-project, forcing teams to focus on short-term fixes instead of resolving root causes. Some systems passed validation only because testing standards were quietly relaxed to avoid further delays. Engineers who warned about long-term consequences were ignored or sidelined, and many began leaving the company out of frustration, taking with them decades of institutional knowledge. Manufacturing conditions made the crisis even worse. Saab's factories lacked the infrastructure to produce components with the precision required to reconcile its engineering ideals with the standardized architectures imposed on it. Suppliers struggled to deliver consistent materials, assembly defects increased, and electrical harnesses failed under real-world vibration. Production delays became routine. Incomplete vehicles accumulated while teams attempted to fix fundamental problems that originated not in workmanship, but in the forced marriage of incompatible systems. What had once been an engineering-driven automaker now resembled a workshop scrambling to patch failures faster than they appeared. Regulatory pressure intensified as safety and reliability complaints multiplied. Several models suffered from inconsistent airbag deployment behavior, malfunctioning stability control systems, and electronic failures that placed drivers at risk. Software patches provided limited relief because many issues were rooted in structural incompatibilities that could not be corrected without redesigning entire subsystems. Each recall drained Saab's finances further, eroded public confidence, and reinforced the perception that the company had lost control of its technology. By the time the final models reached the market, Saab's technical collapse was unmistakable. The cars arrived late, cost too much to build, and carried defects that contradicted everything the brand had historically represented. The breakdown was not caused by incompetence but by the impossible task of forcing innovation into systems structurally incapable of supporting it. Saab's engineering brilliance had not disappeared. It had been suffocated by incompatible platforms, shrinking budgets, and increasingly unrealistic expectations. The vehicles that reached customers did not merely reveal technical flaws, they exposed the deeper truth that Saab's foundations had failed long before the company admitted it. Corporate chaos, infighting, resignations, supplier conflicts, and the global market turning hostile. The corporate collapse of Saab did not unfold through a single dramatic event, but through a relentless accumulation of internal conflicts, broken communication channels, and strategic failures that steadily stripped the company of stability. What had once been a proud engineering organization degenerated into an environment defined by mistrust, exhaustion, and competing agendas that made progress nearly impossible. Departments that had once collaborated now treated one another as obstacles, and every attempt to restore order only revealed how deeply the company's internal structure had deteriorated. Infighting intensified as Saab's technical and financial problems grew impossible to hide. Engineers accused management of ignoring warnings, managers accused engineers of resisting cost controls, and financial teams blamed both for overruns that produced no meaningful results. Meetings devolved into tense standoffs where no one would accept responsibility, and basic decisions became drawn-out battles because every group assumed another was hiding information. Reports were revised, softened, or selectively edited to avoid conflict, creating a distorted understanding of the company's actual situation. Leadership attempted to project unity, but employees saw these gestures as empty reassurance rather than strategy. As internal tension escalated, resignations followed. Senior engineers who had shaped Saab's identity began leaving, convinced their expertise was no longer valued. Project managers resigned after months of juggling contradictory directives, unclear priorities, and timelines that grew more unrealistic with each corporate revision. Even middle managers, once fiercely loyal to Saab's culture, departed after realizing their departments had transformed into crisis zones where responsibility increased while authority shrank. Each departure created gaps that remaining employees struggled to cover, deepening burnout and worsening the instability that had driven people away. Supplier relationships collapsed just as quickly. Saab's constant delays, sudden redesigns, and inconsistent projections made it impossible for vendors to plan production or trust delivery schedules. Suppliers reported receiving conflicting technical specifications from different departments, while others complained that Saab requested urgent shipments without confirming payment. As financial stress intensified, payment delays became routine, prompting disputes that escalated into legal threats. Several major suppliers halted shipments entirely until Saab cleared outstanding balances, forcing the company to scramble for temporary substitutes that introduced new compatibility problems. These conflicts triggered production standstills that frustrated dealers, damaged reputation, and pushed Saab further behind schedule. The global market grew increasingly hostile as news of Saab's instability spread. Dealers in multiple regions reported declines in customer interest, rising complaints about parts availability, and frustration over vehicles stuck in service bays awaiting components Saab could no longer supply. Competitors seized the moment, targeting Saab's dealerships and emphasizing their own stability, reliability, and consistent support. Journalists published detailed reports citing insider leaks, supplier grievances, and industry analyses predicting Saab's failure. These stories circulated widely, accelerating the erosion of consumer confidence and making future sales increasingly unlikely. Inside the company, leadership attempted restructuring plans meant to stabilize operations, but these initiatives collapsed under conflicting agendas and shrinking resources. Executive proposals were undermined by budget cuts, departmental resistance, and shifting priorities that changed from week to week depending on the latest crisis. Internal communications contradicted public statements, and employees were instructed to appear confident even as systems failed around them. Rumors circulated about plant closures, mass layoffs, emergency buyouts, and potential bankruptcy, creating an atmosphere defined by anxiety and uncertainty. Communication within the company deteriorated completely. Departments stopped sharing information unless forced to. Informal alliances formed between teams seeking to protect themselves, and leadership received reports filtered through the layers of political caution. Crucial warnings were buried. Data was delayed or distorted, and decisions were made using incomplete or misleading information. This breakdown created policies that made existing failures even worse, because solutions were based not on reality, but on what departments wanted leadership to believe. Employees described the workplace as chaotic, disorganized, and unsustainable. As Saab's internal structure fractured, the external world applied increasing pressure. Governments questioned whether Saab could meet regulatory obligations, dealers demanded guarantees the company could not provide, and customers grew concerned that buying a Saab meant owning a vehicle that might soon be unsupported. Financial institutions tightened credit terms or withdrew support altogether. With suppliers refusing shipments, engineers resigning, and sales collapsing, Saab found itself trapped in a crisis where every solution required resources it no longer possessed. By the time leadership understood the scale of the breakdown, the company had already lost the internal cohesion and external trust needed to survive. Saab was no longer fighting competitors or market trends. It was fighting its own collapse and losing on every front. The corporate chaos had become irreversible, leaving nothing capable of holding the organization together as its final crisis approached. The final unraveling, the last failed models, the cash crisis, and the collapse nobody could reverse. The final unraveling of Saab did not arrive with a single dramatic collapse, but through a chain of failures, delayed launches, and financial emergencies that made it clear the company had crossed the point where recovery was still possible. By the time the last generation of Saab models reached the market, the organization's structure had weakened so severely that even promising ideas arrived weighed down by shortages, revisions, and the absence of the stability needed to execute them. What should have represented Saab's resurgence instead revealed how little remained of the capacity required to build the cars leadership continued to describe with confidence. The clearest symbol of this decline was the new 9-5, a vehicle promoted as the flagship that would re-establish Saab's identity. Instead, it displayed the consequences of years spent forcing Saab's engineering philosophy into platforms never designed for it. Electrical conflicts, software irregularities, and structural constraints created by incompatible architectures turned the model into a showcase of internal dysfunction. Dealers reported continuous troubleshooting, customers complained about unpredictable behavior, and technicians noted that diagnostic systems regularly misread essential modules. A car meant to restore trust ended up revealing the accumulated damage of compromises that leadership insisted could be managed. The situation worsened with the introduction of the 9-4X, a crossover that could have been a turning point had it entered the market on time. Instead, its development was slowed by shifting directives, supplier instability, and manufacturing disruptions. The first production batches suffered from inconsistent quality and part shortages, and while initial demand existed, Saab lacked the capacity to build enough units to benefit from it. A model that might have generated critical revenue became another financial burden because the company could not produce or support it at scale. As these models faltered, Saab's cash crisis intensified faster than leadership could respond. Revenue collapsed, suppliers demanded upfront payment, and lenders refused to extend credit to a company carrying escalating liabilities and no viable stabilization plan. Saab attempted to secure emergency funding from governments, banks, and international investors, but each negotiation fell apart once the depth of the company's production bottlenecks and technical liabilities became clear. The more potential partners examined Saab's internal records, the more quickly they walked away. In response, Saab adopted increasingly desperate measures. Leadership rose salaries, delayed payments, and repeatedly halted production when parts shortages made assembly impossible. Factories that once represented Saab's independence now sat silent for long stretches, their workers sent home because the company could no longer afford to build the vehicles meant to generate revenue. Each stoppage deepened supplier mistrust, leading vendors to demand immediate payment Saab could not provide, closing off the last dependable supply lines. Customers and dealers, long loyal to the brand, began abandoning it as maintenance support deteriorated. Vehicles already on the road suffered from extended repair delays because Saab could not maintain parts inventory, and warranty claims accumulated faster than they could be resolved. Dealers warned potential buyers that the brand's future was uncertain, accelerating the decline in sales. Saab's reputation, already weakened by years of engineering compromises, collapsed entirely as the public realized the company might not survive long enough to support its existing vehicles. Inside Saab, morale deteriorated into exhaustion and resignation. Employees worked without clear direction, uncertain whether their departments would exist from month to month. Leadership continued issuing optimistic statements, but workers had witnessed too many failed rescue attempts to believe them. Engineers who had stayed out of loyalty now faced frozen budgets, suspended projects, and evaporating resources. Departments that once collaborated closely became isolated, each trying to function without the tools or funding required to do so. The final collapse became unavoidable once Saab's remaining cash reserves were exhausted and last-minute negotiations failed. Suppliers halted shipments permanently, employees stopped receiving wages, and production ended for the final time. With no inventory, no capital, and no viable strategy left, Saab entered insolvency proceedings. The company did not fall because it lacked ideas, but because the infrastructure required to support those ideas had been eroding for years, while leadership insisted solutions were still within reach. When Saab finally shut its doors, the industry reacted not with shock, but with weary recognition. The warning signs had been visible for years. What surprised observers was not the collapse itself, but how long Saab had continued fighting forces it no longer had the strength to resist. The final unraveling had become inevitable the moment its problems outgrew the systems meant to contain them.